All right, we are setting up live. I will give you a countdown. I'm sure it's already recording and I'm just having a lag.
Yeah.
All right, you're good to go.
All right. We are live for episode 4 of the weekly PIDCAST right here on Facebook on the Apocalypse Desperate page every Wednesday, 10 p.m. on the dot. Thank you for tuning in, everybody. I'm sure it's going to take us a second to get everybody in and on course, as it usually does. Tonight, we have a really dope episode, and we actually are doing a couple new things tonight. The first thing you may notice is that how we look is a little different. We go through the Facebook Live apparatus, and so this week we decided to make some changes for the sake of quality. We figure if we're having these discussions and doing this show, we might as well try to have a record of it that is quality, and Facebook's not so great at that. So we're doing things through Zoom now. Should be cool. If we have any issues or if there's any issues with the audio or anything, make sure to let us know in the comments. Tonight, I have my friend Ian. Ian, how are you?
I am wonderful. How are you?
I am doing well, my friend. Ian, of course, for those of you who don't know Ian, he's actually quite a traveled man. He helped start a little band called Settle the Sky from my hometown, Fremont, Ohio, back in the day, and now he fronts Grubby Paws as well as Hanging Fortress.
I'm a busy boy.
Busy boy, got a lot going on. For a
Mm-hmm.
while you were doing a podcast too, so you were doing a little bit of kind of what we were doing here with
Yeah.
the PIDCAST.
Mm-hmm.
um but it's great to have you tonight. We're talking UFOs, Ian, and you have a little bit of a background, personal family connection to this kind of the paranormal and the ET kind of stuff. So can you give us a little bit more information about your dad and what he did?
Oh, for sure. Okay, so there's all things paranormal and all things weird and esoteric in the world. I always get a nice little twinge because that was essentially my entire childhood. I mean, my dad, who by trade was a engineer, worked for a solar company. But he really dabbled in a lot of the sciences. Really intelligent dude, but also had a very, very strong childlike wonderment about the universe, about the weird, about the unknown. And he had this ever since he was a little boy, this undying sort of drive to just dive into all things paranormal or extraterrestrial. And so he combined sort of the worlds of science and esoteric and astral, to just have this amalgamation of just trying to find answers.
Yeah.
And through that, just being the son of this and living with it, waking up on Christmas morning and he's almost burning the house down trying to do experiments with weird elements in the kitchen. Uh, I mean, you just sort of hear things like just earlier. I downloaded. I paid $6 to become a member again of Coast to Coast AM.
Yeah.
George Norrie, previously Art Bell, rest in power. And I downloaded. He was on Coast to Coast. And he throughout the 90s and kind of early to mid, I would even say late 2000s until he sadly passed away. He paired up with predominantly a she hated the term, but psychic. So sort of doing a medium sort of thing, but then also meeting with science, trying to
Yeah.
kind of cross the bridge there. And so a lot of my childhood was spent just in this world of just like my dad sitting on a phone talking with, a witch from Canada, just
Yeah.
talking about like, when I was in this meditation, I was in this astral plane, but then also like talking to a woman from Italy who was abducted by aliens and was actually given very privy information about the technological advances of alien, technology. like just like this was just I came home from school and it was this.
One day you woke up and all of a sudden.
Yeah, there's a lot of weird shit. So I'm learned by proxy, just by exposure.
Yeah.
You know, I
Well, that's the best way. That's the best way to learn, and I think that's where it all begins for a lot of us. I know that for me, my interest in the paranormal and the extraterrestrial things, uh, it just was one of those things that you kind of stumble upon in your life, and you're like, wow, this is actually quite a monumental question, and I haven't asked it yet, and I feel like not enough people are asking it. Um, when you get into the nitty gritty about some of these things with ET, it's like, some of the questions you end up asking yourself: has ET influenced the evolution of human beings? Has ET, does the United States government or any government have craft that have been recovered from extraterrestrials, of crafts that are not from this planet, not man-made origin? And you having that personal touch with your father, who was a bit of a paranormal enthusiast, hobbyist, investigationalist, including, like you sent me last week, he had the interview where he was on Coast to Coast.
yeah.
So there's a whole episode with your dad and Art Bell that you can access from the Coast to Cove archives right now.
Oh yeah. It's I have the link. I can post it maybe later in post.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was from February. I think it was like February 20th in 2006.
Yeah. Well, that's amazing. And of course, rest in power to the great Art Bell, and of course, rest in power to your father as well, the late great Nick Reiter.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll have to. I actually haven't had a chance to listen to that episode yet, so I'm gonna have to take a listen to it. I guess you can't really start talking about UFOs unless you start from the beginning. And when I say the beginning, I basically mean, for me, the entry point of information for UFOs in my own personal, there's an argument to be made. Have aliens been around prior to World War II? I think obviously if you come to the same conclusions about them that I have come to, you'll make that same conclusion as well. Yeah, definitely. They probably have been, but World War II is this kind of point in human history where there were huge technological advances, and a lot of weird shit started kind of happening. A lot of paradigm shifts occurred.
For sure.
We had Foo Fighters in the early part of the war, where these craft that would chase around Americans that were fighting the Pacific Theater, airborne, the fighter pilots and stuff that were flying the jets, and they would have these encounters with these what they would call Foo Fighters, and they thought that they were possibly of Japanese origin or some sort of enemy combatant. But as time has gone on, we look at a lot of that and we're like, that's unexplained. We don't really know what that was.
And just for the kids out there, not Dave Grohl related.
Yeah, no, the name of the Foo Fighters actually comes from the term that the pilots used during World War II to refer to these, kind of these strange unidentified craft.
Mm-hmm.
And then of course Roswell was 5 years later, after
mm-hmm.
the Foo Fighter phenomenon really was a thing at 42. Of course, Roswell happened in 1947.
What's interesting about a lot of these things is, historically speaking, you have a domino effect, especially when data collection is a little bit more accessible, because but if we're talking just in general, and if you actually dive into the history of extraterrestrial, obviously, I'm trying not to have a ancient aliens moment. Look, I'm not saying it's aliens, but it's aliens. But this has been things that have been documented, but it's only until that era when cameras were really developing, and just sort of just technology in general is really developing, and how information is able to travel,
aged
and quickly. And
yeah,
so that's why, and that's why you had that moment in history, and then a couple years later, then you have Roswell, and then a couple years later that, and you just start having all these circumstances. It's a absolutely fascinating domino effect, but that's just how quickly things can just roll, especially when technology advances.
Well, let me ask you this. Do you think that what you're describing, that phenomenon of, okay, we're just kind of going about normal human history, and there's no, of course we do have the ancient, aliens, and of course all the pre-World War II stuff that still went on and was still real. But then World War II happens, and then there's this shift. It seems like now it's become like a huge part of the public consciousness. Now nobody's, everybody's talking about it. Everybody wants to know what's going on with it. And it's at a point in time in human history where the world is kind of on edge. It's post World War II. There's now a power struggle that exists between the United States and Russia.
Mhm.
And the hydrogen bomb, the atom bomb. I think. What are your thoughts on the theory, or do you think it was more so the change in technology and how fast information spread, or do you think that there's a chance that when the atom bomb was deployed, that drew some intergalactic attention that we maybe weren't getting before?
I love how I was listening to my dad earlier, and I feel like I'm channeling his energy right now, where a lot of times you just kind of have to take the most pragmatic approach possible, but always you have a seed. I always call it like a whenever there's a theory, a potential of like, was this arms race, sort of a giant red flag that brought the attention of extraterrestrial life? I always want to never say absolutes, but I always want to steer towards I won't say anything except that it is interesting that this tiny little moment in time potentially equates to all this. Now, all this that I'm talking of has a lot of bullshit, has a lot of things that you got to kind of sift through, and the people, attention getters, or, I mean, who knows, in a nuclear arms race, in a dick measuring contest, countries around the world are probably going to be like, no, we have the UFOs. We get the experiences here. We have the real shit. With all that inside, you just kind of sift through it and just find the interest in the fact that, okay, it is interesting. Now, very long story short, I'm a skeptic on, that being the catalyst of or a nuclear arms race being the catalyst of more extraterrestrial presence.
Yeah.
But I do find it interesting. I find it like, it makes you stop and think, with every crazy conspiracy that you're ever going to have, as crazy as they are. I mean, like you can pull a David Icke book off the shelf about the reptilian agenda and how there's fucking reptiles, running the New World Order. But then you're like, well, that's crazy. I don't really believe that. But then they'll bring you in with that one historically factual thing. You're like, well, this is that weird, isn't it? Yeah. Like, and you kind of go, sure.
Maybe.
Yeah, right. And that creates this entire interest, this entire, research into these things, because those moments in history, like you just said, of just like, could it potentially that, once technology advanced, and especially warfare advancing, if there is a universal highway and people are driving by and they're like, what the fuck is that? Is that a mushroom? No, that's a cloud.
Yeah.
Oh God, that's a lot of nuclear power. Like, maybe, sure.
Somewhere in the intergalactic interference, background radiation and stuff, they just detected this huge, maybe who's to say that a civilization, didn't detect just this huge spike? Like, what the hell was that? It's coming from the Milky Way. We got to get over there and see what the fuck was going on with that, because we've never seen anything like that before. Right. And it is a cool theory, but like you said, and it's probably wise to err a little bit on the side of cautious, be cautious and say, is there evidence to support this? And there really isn't. That's kind of the problem with a lot of UFO stuff, is UFO stuff's always been on the fringe of science. It's never embraced the scientific method, because we want to, there's a certain, it lends to basking in the conspiracy aspect of it. You want to bask in it, and reject the man, and say that the man's hiding shit, and they know, and they're not telling us. Mm-hmm. But we really do need to kind of be careful and say, okay, what evidence do we have?
Right.
Well, and when we look at it that way, we can say, okay, the evidence seems to be that after we detonated the hydrogen bomb in World War II in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, that UFO and ET activity skyrocketed.
For
That
sure.
seems to be the evidence for that theory.
Right.
Now,
And
the real question is, was it still as prevalent before and just not reported? Or did it become more prevalent afterward?
see, that's where you start having to kind of set lines of belief.
Yeah.
And honestly, if we're talking on the spectrum of things that I am absolutely nerdy about, I would say number one, outside of the Castlevania franchise, it would be history. No,
Yeah.
just absolute, just I want historical facts,
Period.
and period, for sure. And if you look deep into history, these things are prevalent. These things are talked about. So the idea that it wasn't necessarily happening on a frequency in the amount that it was happening in the era of the 1900s, I have a hard time believing that. But I'm more of the belief of where technology was and our maybe social awareness even back then started kind of waking up a certain phenomena, so I would like to believe, if we're talking my personal belief, I would think that these things were prevalent for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years of human existence, thousands of years of human existence. But it's only up until the past 200, I would say maybe 100 years, 150 years, that you go back to the late 1800s and early 1900s, that you start getting a little bit more interesting tales and folklores.
Yeah, and I've got to admit, I kind of subscribe to the same theory. I think that, in my personal belief, based on the evidence that I've seen and the theories that have been presented to me, I think that aliens have probably been around for thousands of years. I don't think that it necessarily is something new to the second half of the 20th century. I think there is, a question to be asked. I don't know if there's quite an argument to be made yet, but there's a question to be asked based on the evidence. Has extraterrestrials had any role in human evolution? And I think that that's a question, but I don't really know that there's any evidence to support it. I know that the theory is made like the missing link when you think about evolution. There's,
Right.
a huge leap of evolution that's missing, and we just kind of went from here to here, and nobody really understands where the species that existed in the middle went.
Right.
And there's questions that people will pose. Did aliens have a role in that? What is your thoughts? Do you think that extraterrestrials of any sort had any role in human evolution?
I'm gonna stick with my guns, and I'm gonna say I don't think there would be necessarily any reason for them to have their hands as far as the human evolution, even the sort of like, you go to ancient Egypt and the making of the pyramids and all those theories. I don't see the interest in an alien race doing that, based on the evidence that I know, which is lofty in itself. So I would say I don't necessarily subscribe to that, but there are moments in time where you have to kind of just go, oh, that is kind of weird, isn't it? That they had such smooth, pyramid, or like their brick making process to making the pyramids, and how they made these such grandiose figures with such little.
Millions of these stones.
Yeah.
And
So
even modern archaeologists look at the pyramids and they're like, well, they probably had a ramp, but we don't really know how else. Like,
right. Well,
even
I
modern,
gotta.
well-studied experts on the topic will say we don't really know.
Right. I'm gonna plug in my router real quick, just so we don't lose connection.
Okay.
So if
For
you
sure.
want to kind of maybe like levy towards the next topic, and
Yeah.
I'll hop in a second. I'll be right
Yeah,
back.
yeah. So, well, and actually, yeah. So I think we covered a lot of really good base there. And that was pretty much what I wanted to talk about. I wanted to pose that question because it's a question I've been asking myself lately in reflection. I've been watching a lot of documentaries and a lot of YouTube stuff on extraterrestrials and the evidence that exists, and that's a question I've been asking myself. I mean, it would make sense. It's not a theory that's absent of logic. It's just a theory in my eyes that's a little absent of motivation. What is the motivation for an alien race to jumpstart a species that they're combing the galaxy, and obviously they're intelligent and advanced enough to understand how to comb the galaxy. So what brings them to this, this giant hot gassy rock in the middle of nowhere where these monkeys are throwing shit at each other and makes them decide, like, let's give them the push.
I mean, yeah, that's the one main argument, and I'm looking in the comments here. Caleb says they would have needed to place 1 2-ton block every 2 minutes to complete the pyramids in the time scientists believe it was completed.
Yeah,
Those are the little blurbs that you just kind of
that's
go,
that's what
wait
makes
a
it so
second.
that's what
Yeah,
makes it so interesting, because
for
even
sure.
even now, even modern archaeologists look at the pyramids and they're like, the kind of technology that would have been needed to construct this,
Mm-hmm.
either we
It's
either we don't understand it or it's been lost to time.
or, and this is maybe an unpopular thing, our collection of data is severely inaccurate. Perhaps the timeline that scientists believe that these things were built maybe is extremely exaggerated.
I think that there's a lot of credence to that based on the fact that Homo sapiens are about, what, 300,000 years old. The human race as we know it
Yes.
now in its
Yeah.
most basic form has only been around for about 300,000 years, but written history only goes back to 10,000 years. So you're going to tell
Yeah.
me that the other 290,000 years of Homo sapiens beyond this earth, we didn't have technology, civilizations, languages, information that have been lost?
Right. There's
Who's to
there's a
say we didn't have
lot
another
there's a
200,000?
lot lost.
What was
Mm-hmm.
that library that they burned down? It was the big historical event where, was that the Baghdad library?
I don't recall.
I'm trying to recall the exact details, but it was something that I saw the other day where they estimate that, the amount of human history that we lost, because it was a library and there was a
Oh shit! Yeah, I did hear about that.
act from another civilization, and it's totally blanking me right now. But
Me
basically,
too.
what was that?
No, Alexandria.
Alexandria, exactly.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys. Jake, and Garrett came in with that tag team.
Oh, thank you very much, Jason Garrett. Yeah, and we'll get with the comments here. I want to catch up with the comments here in a second. I just want to finish this point, but yeah, and so we have this giant library of
Mm-hmm.
shit, and it just burns down one day, and with it probably goes everything, almost the extent of human knowledge up until that point. But you're gonna sit there and try and convince me that for 290,000 years we just did nothing.
Right.
We didn't learn anything. We didn't advance. We didn't evolve. We didn't grow. It just doesn't make a lot of sense.
Right. No. So that's why I think with a lot of things of how I personally carry myself, or maybe even the people I associate with when talking about these topics, I always want to have, again, just sort of a little room for wonderment. Just sort of like, that is weird. That isn't. There's a lot of time where we just have nothing.
No
We
clue.
have no clue.
Not even the slightest.
Like,
We're lucky if we find
yeah,
a fossil, somewhere in the desert. We dig up a fossil and we're like, oh, great, this is a treasure trove.
for sure. And that makes, even in current today life, fascinating. Where, for example, we know more about space than we do the ocean on our
Only
own
about
fucking
5%
planet.
of only about 5% of Earth's oceans have been explored.
Yeah.
But we have $1 trillion infrastructure in space.
Right. So there's always going to be something on the cusp somewhere. There's going to be and the beautiful thing, and any scientist will tell you this, and if it's one thing that my dad taught me growing up, is science can be completely eradicated on everything that they have found in research on something by one thing, and then they have to go back to the drawing board. But that's sort of the pull of science. Like, isn't it fascinating that we might be so far down the line here and have this belief and understanding and all these tests and measures and figuring this out, and then we come and stumble upon something that is so fascinating that it literally makes everything we've done for the past 20 years bullshit.
You mean to tell me that the universally accepted theory of relativity that governs physics in our universe currently, that was developed by Albert Einstein, is already quite something we can poke holes in with some new theories that are emerging? And you mean to tell me that everything I've ever understood about how the world works could be completely wrong because now we know how to detect how things actually work in different ways?
Yep.
Shit is wild, my dude. Let's go ahead and get into some of the comments, and then I want to move through some of these topics that we laid out before the show tonight, because we got quite a few topics we want to talk about. We're not just going to blab on, but what's going on in the comments?
Okay, well, I'll start from the top here. I'll just kind of scroll on up. Oh, you guys are popping off in here, y'all. What is happening?
Oh, we got a pop and stream. That's good news.
Yeah.
I have no, just so the viewers know, Ian's helping me out majorly on this week's episode. I was some technical limitations on my end allowed for Ian to kind of take charge. I don't even have the feed in front of me, so I have no idea what anybody's saying. I'm relying entirely off you for that.
So I have the power. All right. So it's someone said, please touch on extra dimensional beings. Trust me, I have that in my back pocket. I'm ready to fucking rock on that shit. And I think we're sort of going down that trail. Aliens be mad about them nukes. Reptilians have the new world order in where it works right now. Then Caleb told us his factoid about the pyramids, and then Garrett and Jake tag team and helping us out with Alexandria. And then Garrett says, we understand what we have already perceived in the universe, and I'll roll with that. That's the point of scientific investigation and scientific theory. Yep. So he's rolling along with us. We get there. We mill about it, you know.
Well, so we kind of got on a little bit of a time track earlier with the World War II stuff, so let's jump right into that. So Roswell, 1947, what is obviously the most famous and most well-known UFO incident to ever occur, I would say, in history, is Roswell, New Mexico. Supposedly, a flying saucer crashed, landed. I think it was up to 3 flying saucers that crashed in the New Mexico desert, and were reportedly recovered by the United States government, who then changed the story. There's the famous picture of the newspaper clippings from the day of when everything happened, and they're calling it flying saucers, and then a week later it's weather balloons now. Interestingly enough, 90 days after Roswell, the CIA was created, and the Air Force was branched off from being part of the Army. It was called the Army Air Force. So now it has its own branch in the military. So something happened at Roswell to where the U.S. government felt it necessary to create the Central Intelligence Agency, and then to also create an entirely new division of the armed forces separate from the Army, just for things in the air. What do you think happened at Roswell?
All right. Well, I've already had black cars follow me before, so I guess I'm already on a list somewhere. So I guess I could just pop off on this. I think what we were presented was extremely out of context and a massive fuck up. I do think it is. There is core and extraterrestrial happenings. Based on what I've read, I really think that I don't want to say that it's sort of connected to the kind of future tense of like the Area 51 shit, of trying to study alien craft or recreate craft. But I think that a lot of times these things tend to happen when trying to either study or replicate or figure out potential aircraft that might not be of this world. There are some fuck ups, and I think this might have been a thing well before. And this wasn't just some happenstance on an alien craft just randomly crashed. I think there was a significant history, and this is just a oopsie daisy, and the government going, oops, there, hold on.
Yeah, let's retcon that real quick.
Yeah, let's start cleaning this up a little bit.
Yeah. So do you think the crafts that crashed at Roswell, do you think they were U.S. government? Do you think they were alien reproduction vehicles? Do you think that they were test vehicles, or do you think that they were legitimately extraterrestrial?
That I won't go into an absolution. I don't have the data for that. I just go with the gut of like,
what's your gut tell you?
My gut says that they were probably in the early phases of trying to figure out extraterrestrial flight. I think they had previous knowledge, and it just sort of they're terrible at it.
So you think Roswell wasn't like the coming out party per se? It was just the first fuck up where they're like, okay, we can't hide this.
For sure.
Okay. So yeah. So and I think that's probably pretty fair to say. There's UFO reports, all the way as early that can be documented in 1912, and then of course into the 19th century. This is something that they knew about, I think, well ahead. I don't think that they really had the tools or had recovered the craft until probably the beginning of the 20th century. I'm assuming World War One, maybe World War II, is when they actually recovered some of these crafts. I think that Roswell was probably them attempting to fly these and then just crashing them.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it always, I find it funny when we use the term logic when we're talking about something that's so fringe. Yeah. But my logic says that if I'm going to have a belief system that caters to this historical timeline based on the events of Roswell, I would think that's in my brain meat. That makes sense to me.
Yeah, exactly. And I think ultimately that's really what it should come down to is we shouldn't necessarily be just on the hunt for the most extraordinary answer. We should be on the hunt for the most pragmatic answer. And while the pragmatic answer may be extraordinary, we shouldn't always necessarily decide to settle on the most like the biggest spectacle, right? Like a big spectacle. Oh, these aliens crashed in Roswell. It's more probably just, we already know that we do test flights out there. We already know that that's a big, that's where we develop our secret aircrafts and test our bombs is right there. So it was probably just one of those things where they're like, let's take the alien crafts on a nice Sunday flight, and oops.
Fuck.
Shit. That's a big mistake. Yeah.
And then some nosy journalist is like, hey,
what
I'm
the
gonna put
fuck's going on here?
I'm gonna do it. Put this in the paper. And take a bunch of pictures.
You're
fuck.
You're Harry S. Truman in 1947, and now you've got to like figure out how the fuck, after World War II, giant fucking arms race with the Soviet Union. You've got to figure out how to, maybe we just don't talk about the UFO thing for a while.
Yeah. and then just quickly turning into like, oh, that was weird, huh? So what's going on over here?
Yeah. Well, and that brings us to Project Blue Book, which do you know about Project Blue Book?
Yeah.
So it was a U.S. government secret program, black book program, off the books, secretly funded, all that good stuff, headed by J. Allen Hynek. And what J. Allen Hynek was tasked by the Air Force to do was to debunk UFOs. He was literally hired. The reason that this program was created was because they wanted to get somebody in there that would dispute UFOs, that would debunk them, and that would ease public fears about what these were and why they're flying around in our skies. Now, what do you know about Blue Book?
The very elementary basics,
okay.
Like just sort of the how it was presented to me when I was a young lad was essentially like there's a book or like a kind of frequently updated piece of writing that sort of is the blueprint of how the hows and do's and do nots of essentially fire control and all things UFO,
Yeah.
and you have previous presidents on record when sort of questioned about, the ins and outs of this, of like, is there an actual protocol for this? And
Yeah.
I think it was Jimmy Carter who was like, yeah, there's some weird shit. I
Yeah,
think
we'll get into that. But there's presidents who literally were denied because they were told they're not need to know. The president of the United States has been told before, no, we can't. You are not on need to know.
right.
That's
So
how
that's
shit goes.
my basic understanding, is that there is just a guide that is very, 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 very guarded. And when something is very, very, very guarded, instantly you just have to go, why?
Yeah.
That's weird.
The most guarded, well-known, open secret in the history of humankind.
Absolutely. And so that makes me
That's
just go,
what's amazing about it. But did you know that Blue Book, which was, it ran from I think 1961 to 1969. I believe that the program in terms of any sort of record ended in 1969. They kept the program continued, under a different name. That's when the government said that in general that they weren't investigating these things anymore. In 2017, the Pentagon came out and said that that was all a lie. We never stopped investigating this, and in fact, we have a whole agency dedicated just to this. But
oops.
Project Blue Book led to the person that they tasked, J. Allen Hynek, a well-known skeptic, a well-known, academic and smart person, smart man. He became a full-fledged, huge believer in extraterrestrial life after Blue Book.
Yep.
What a shocker.
Right. I mean, some may say that would be able to find some capability of still having like skepticism when, somebody who is an outward skeptic walks away from a very top secret thing going, holy fucking shit.
It's absolutely real.
Yeah.
And then they kind of beat him up. Excuse me.
Uh-oh. Dying.
Might need some water. But then they made him out to be this fucking loon. Let me get some water real quick.
While you get your water. Yeah. That fucking loon. No, but that seems to be the easy way to dry the erase board, so to speak, is being able to pish posh somebody who has a lot of clout, so to speak, in a particular field. They're crazy now.
Yeah.
They're old and erratic,
Well, we gotta cut their platform out from underneath them.
Right.
To help keep the state-sponsored secrets.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about Betty and Barney Hill?
I am not well read. You're gonna have to dive in for me.
The gist of Betty and Barney Hill is it's basically the prototypical close encounter of the fourth kind. It's probably the most documented, well-known case of alien abduction. Betty and Barney Hill were an interracial couple in the 60s, which, of course, was a very controversial thing back then.
Mm-hmm.
And they claim that they, and you'll have to excuse me on the exact details on a lot of the story because I don't honestly know all the exact details, but the gist of their claim is that they were driving home and all these weird things started to happen. They saw this bright light in the sky, and the next thing they are, they're home and they're lost and confused and don't understand how they got where they were, and they have these memories of being taken onto an alien craft. Betty and Barney Hill both have undergone hypnosis, and there's that, that was documented and stuff.
You're really jogging my memory now. I've definitely heard these.
Yeah. What do you think about what do you think about Betty and Barney Hill and Close Encounters of the Fourth Kind in general?
So I'm gonna try and reel in the long-windedness on this, because when I was kind of going through my dad's kind of notes and research pieces, one of the things that he was actually printed on in one of the magazines that he contributed to, he did a case study on predominantly with people who experience abductions, but also people who just were having paranormal experiences, and he wanted to test essentially the environmental gauge of, I'm gonna sound so I'm gonna get incinerated for this, magnets, just magnetism. My dad was always fascinated with finding a gauge of measure in these circumstances. Not particularly, because you've ever heard of the term haunted, you've had haunted house, but there's
Right.
also the term haunted people. A lot is actually said in the realm of alien abduction, is there are just particular haunted people in that realm.
Right.
What is significant in their environment? What is significant about them that creates this phenomena? As far as their experiences, it's very reminiscent of, essentially it became sort of the stereotype for an alien abduction. Bright light, I'm frozen. There's been dozens and dozens of movies.
Time lost.
Right.
Yeah.
Vague memories. I'm in a white room and it's cold. Sure. Those details in my mind, I can take or leave.
Yeah.
But I'm more fascinated and sort of kind of like Garrett kind of pointed out earlier, of just sort of like keeping yourself planted and just kind of taking things as they come to you on the ground and kind of approaching your belief system that way. And that I align with how my dad was. He wanted to find a gauge. He wanted to find some kind of measurement, and his findings were pretty interesting. At least it was at least enough of a study where you could take a step back and go, that is interesting. There are significant environmental spikes in the magnetism around that was measured around these particular people versus everyday Joe Schmo who are part of the case study.
Right.
So the rhyme and reason why these particular people sort of welcome that sort of hole, both literally and figuratively, I don't know. But as far as a story like that as being the sort of like catalyst abduction story, I start with the core. Something happened. It was fucking weird. I'm listening. That's as far as I'll go as far as my belief in the whole situation.
Yeah, I think again we're finding parallels, between us, as we always do when we have conversations of this nature. In my opinion, do I think that abductions have never occurred? No, I think that there's enough circumstantial evidence and enough documented testimony to say that there's probably been a few that have happened, and there's the aliens. Let's say that there is an alien race, and okay, well, what's their motivation in abducting people? Well, you want to learn about the progress of an organism. You want to learn about how it's built, what it's doing on the inside, what makes it tick. So that logically makes sense. What doesn't really logically make sense to me is why they're doing it still. I think that
you've got enough data, don't you think?
they probably had enough data 100,000 years ago.
Right. If that was the case.
So I think it's total bullshit? No, but I'm much less inclined to believe in Close Encounters of the Fourth Kind than I am to believe in the Close Encounters of the Third Kind, which are obviously the UFO sightings. Right. I think those are far more something that I can kind of wrap my head around. I think aliens are real. I'll just full disclosure. I think that they're real. I think that there are intelligent races out there in the galaxy besides our own. And I believe that they know about us and have been here. Do I think that they're all that concerned with, picking up Joe Schmo from, behind the Arby's and abducting him into the craft and poking him and putting a butt plug in him? I don't think that they're interested. I think that, Betty and Barney Hill is an interesting case, and they may be legitimate. That may have been an actual incident of fourth kind encounter. I don't. It's got more evidence than most cases do. Right. But I don't think that it contributes to an overarching level of evidence that says that Close Encounters of the Fourth Kind are something that really deserve too much more of our attention. A super interesting UFO incident that happened in 1964 was the Lonnie Zamora incident. Lonnie Zamora was a New Mexico police officer who had a well-documented, well-researched sighting from 1964. And the very interesting thing about Lonnie Zamora is when you read about his superiors and the people that he worked with, his family, his friends, this was not a man who was known to be any sort of bullshit. This was a man who was known to be very much told it how he saw it. He didn't sugarcoat things. He didn't twist things. He didn't lie. He didn't exaggerate. Mm-hmm. He was a stand-up, he's a cop, military veteran, stand-up guy. And he gave one of the most compelling and detailed accounts of a UFO sighting in 1964, describing a craft much similar to the Tic Tac that we hear about in the Tic Tac UFO incident. What do you know about Lonnie Zamora? Did your dad ever look into this particular incident, or what background knowledge do you have on Lonnie Zamora?
I don't have any necessarily dive in knowledge, and I don't recall ever really seeing my dad having any writings about it, but I'm sure he was definitely on his radar. So I do have, maybe not necessarily specifically to that instance, but I do want to make a point.
Yeah.
When it comes to this idea of the most stand-up, non-stereotypical guy stepping aside and going, hold up, there is some shit and it's fucking weird. My dad had a case quite a few years ago. I'll leave the person's name not in this, but it was a gentleman that lived down in Columbus, and he had an experience where, if I tell you the experience, to the normal person, they're just going to go, what the living fuck did you just say to me? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say the experience first, and then I'm going to give you the counterpoint around it. The experience was, not only is Bigfoot real, Bigfoot is actually an alien race that abducted him and took his semen from him and artificially inseminated the female Sasquatch species on this alien craft. And this gentleman had the belief that he had humanoid Bigfoot offspring that would come visit him. Now, you say this and you go, what in the living fuck just happened?
What is this fucking guy talking about?
Here's the thing with him. I've met him. I went down on 2 occasions on my dad going to research odd metal droppings that were found in his yard, and then like videos and just keeping up on the consistent, like, day to day, like there's a new sighting, news video, there's a new metal I want you to test. And I went down on 2 occasions, and I actually got to meet this guy. And this is where the tie-in here, the full circle here. Not a nut at all. Normal guy, blue collar, older, early 60s. Worked at like, just factory for 40 years, like working on his car.
Yeah. Just a normal guy.
Normal dude talking. Their tinfoil was not lining his house. He was not paranoid. If you were going to do a sociological sort of thing, which my dad was also kind of interested in, just understanding the exhibit A, which is the person, he hit all the marks of just an old fella, just a guy. And he was nice as hell. But when you talk to him about these instances, he talked about these occurrences, he told you so matter-of-factly, like, yeah, I know it's crazy, but I this is literally all I can tell you. You have to sit back and just go, I believe that you think you're telling the truth, because there's nothing about this person that says I'm bullshitting you.
Yeah.
And very long story short, kind of goes into that instance that we were previously talking about in the early 60s, where this guy is this military guy, police officer, straight and narrow, sound of mind, sound of character, going, I don't know, man. It's weird. It's weird. And that's literally
that's where the most compelling stuff comes from for me.
Right.
Because I know a lot of people like Lonnie Zamora. I know people that are exactly the same way as Lonnie Zamora is described, of being sound of mind, of being, not really one to lend to these kind of ideas, these crazy ideas happening. But he saw what he saw.
For sure.
And there's no doubt about that.
And it gives it that much more clout of just like, this guy's saying shit. Okay. I mean, again, it's one of those things where you have to sift through the fluff, sift through the bullshit. Caleb is 100% on board with the extraterrestrial Bigfoot theory, dude. Right. But that's another podcast, I think. Just going into Bigfoot.
Man, can you imagine? Can you imagine this all this time? Fucking Jack Link's beef jerky is known.
Well, I will say a side note. I've been on paranormal picnics before where you have UFO people, ghost people, and Bigfoot people who all just come hang out and have a luncheon, and they bring food, have a potluck, and
that's awesome.
Just talk shop. The ghost people are pretentious as fuck. Like there's the normal the normies.
Yeah.
Sort of like if we're talking like the high school, those are like the jocks and the cheerleaders.
Yeah.
And then you have the UFO people. Those are the nerds. Like
the stoners.
They're cool.
Yeah.
But the people we want to fucking hang out with are the Bigfoot people. They're dope as fuck.
Yeah.
And I learned there are essentially kind of 3 main belief systems when it comes to Bigfoot. It is an actual creature that's just wandering the woods. That Bigfoot is either extraterrestrial or interdimensional, or that it is a Native American spirit that only presents itself to people who are in that realm, in that part of the astral. Yes.
Right.
So, and why I'm okay talking about this little side piece here is the guy. God, the names are escaping me now. I know we talked about how terrible we are with names earlier.
Yeah.
John Keel, the guy who did the Mothman prophecies, I think that's his name. He had a book called The Eighth Tower. My brother mentioned to me earlier, and is essentially saying that when we're talking about UFOs, when we talk about ET, you are also talking about everything else. These things are tentacles to one big fucking weird octopus.
Yeah.
You know, so when you talk aliens, you gotta have to talk a little shop over here too. Of
Yeah.
like, you know what? Maybe Bigfoot's in on this shit too. You don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe
And
there is a Mothman in West Virginia.
I'm open to those ideas, man. I want the world to be more peculiar and mysterious and vague and interesting than what it's proven to be. That I think that's what's compelling about cryptids and UFOs and stuff, is it represents what we don't know, which is far more interesting than what we do. What we do know is fucking boring.
And a lot of times fucking
I,
sucks.
I have this roll of tape, right? I know that if I drop it on the ground right now, there's a force called gravity that's going to act upon it, and that's going to bring it down to the ground. And that when it reaches the ground, it's going to bounce back up, because every action has an opposite and equal reaction. This is all boring stuff. You know, what we understand is not compelling. What's compelling is what we don't understand, and how that operates into, you know, what we perceive to be our future.
But what if I told you there's a way to manipulate how gravity works and manipulate ways that jet propulsion in space can happen?
Will you be telling me exactly what Bob Lazar told me in 1991?
Segue, baby. Let's go. You like that? Fucking
I love it.
yeah. Let's talk about Bobo.
You threw that ball up on the rim, bro, and I just dunked it.
Hell yeah. You're MJ. I'm Scottie Pippen. Let's go.
So Bob Lazar, let's talk. Yeah, you can't talk about UFOs without talking about Bob Lazar. I feel like he's the resident, you know, kind of like the main thing that you got to talk about. Bob Lazar is a man who claims to have worked at an area on an area in Area 51 called Area S4 that operated on secret craft, extraterrestrial craft. Bob Lazar claims that he was recruited for this job. He was working at, I believe, Los Alamos. And so he ends up getting recruited to this job where it's all top secret. They're not giving him any information. He gets there, and it's all very segmented away from each other. So the people that are doing metallurgy and stuff like that are segmented away from the propulsion guys. But it becomes very clear to this Bob Lazar gentleman very quickly that the craft and things that he's being asked to investigate and reverse engineer are not of this earth. There's quite a lot of that story that, you know, he eventually ends up leaving S4 and then going public with the story. And then there's a whole slew of other topics to cover about Bob Lazar. But the point of it is that his claims, he has not changed. The story has not changed in 30 years. The man didn't gain anything from his claims. He actually, if he gained anything, it was 2 criminal charges. And the
right.
Having his entire history, including his birth certificate and work history, as well as his degrees from MIT, erased. So if he had anything to gain from this, he certainly never got
it. What's interesting about Bob, and I will kind of throw my hat in. My dad did have correspondence with Bob Lazar. They were at least they sent letters back and forth. More so in a professional manner of you know, because Bob has his lab in Detroit. And my dad also bought stock of different weird metals from the same place Bob did, and so they were just like talking shop. But my dad actually had a theory with Bob. Well, there's 2 things that my dad said about Bob. One, he believed he was telling the truth, dead honest. He absolutely, by my dad's own personal account of his correspondence with him, it's not bullshit. However, my dad did he did make a point at some time to go, sometimes I tend to think that Bob Lazar is actually from an alternate timeline and he got stuck in the wrong one. And that sort of explains why you can't necessarily find anything of his past, his work history, because that's what his life was in a parallel.
Yeah.
But he somehow, in his work in Area 51,
jumped the dimensions,
and he was not in this dimension.
Just never went back.
Yeah, my dad did mention that. But on an honest level, he was like, yeah, and I think the realistic thing is the CIA just got really, really butthurt that they got out nerded. And the fact that this motherfucker is still slinging out plutonium in his fucking lab today
Yeah.
says that he's still got that fucking ray gun, that motherfucking thing on him.
Yeah.
And he hasn't been
He's got
fucking
that
silenced or
element
killed yet.
He's got that element 115. It really makes you wonder if Bob Lazar is telling the truth, which I believe that he is.
Mm-hmm. Same.
Then you got to think he's got some leverage.
He ain't dead yet.
He's not dead, and they kind of stopped fucking with him.
Yeah, because I think there is a stalemate. I think there's also a limit to what Bob knows.
Yeah,
Bob knows a microcosm worth of information of the bigger picture, so he can't really be a too big a whistleblower outside of I saw some shit. It was kind of weird.
Yeah.
That's about the extent of it. So the CIA got butthurt for a minute in the early 90s and was like, oh, and so they burned all his records. But then at that point, they kind of go, maybe we didn't really need to do that.
Yeah.
And after a couple raids, they just kind of go, he's not doing anything with it.
Yeah. It's not like he's engineering, anti-gravity machines in his garage or anything.
Right. That we know of.
But it's because we don't know of that technology.
No, and Bob doesn't have the know-how of it. The extent of Bob's knowledge, in my personal belief, and based on what my dad briefly spoke about him, he had just obviously had the slight exposure to the very tippy top of the iceberg.
Yeah,
which speaks volumes of that's a lot. Like there's so much that we don't know if that is just the very minimal.
Well, that goes into in 2017, the declassification of ATIP and the declassification, basically in 2017, what we saw was a sea change. We saw was a complete sea change in how the United States government responds to and acknowledges UFOs. Before, they were on a complete policy of denial. Basically, we are not doing anything with UFOs. It's all this bullshit. We're not, yada, yada, yada. The truth is, and as admitted by the Pentagon in 2017, that not only did they not stop investigating UFOs after Blue Book like they claimed, that there's been secret black budget work and research going on in UFOs since Roswell, and it never stopped. And there's actually an agency of the Pentagon called ATIP, that is the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. It is a real, entirely 100% U.S. government agency that is tasked with identifying and understanding threats in aerospace that we currently do not understand or have any sort of comprehension of. And the declassification of ATIP in 2017 was due in part, crazily enough, because this is the fucked up, goofy madness world we live in, was partially declassified thanks to the help of one Tom DeLonge of Blink-182, who
you can't write this shit.
You can't write this. You couldn't write a better book. Tom DeLonge of Blink-182, the guy who said he wanted to get fucked in the ass by a dog, ends up going on to helping declassify the existence of the U.S. government's UFO program.
Yeah.
And gets 3 videos declassified, which is radar. They call it it's the flare. It's an acronym. It stands for radar. It's some sort of radar thing, but it's this device that's on the plane, and that they film. Like when you're seeing the videos of the Tic Tac UFO and the Go Fast UFO, you're seeing it from the cockpit of the flare, which is this specialized camera viewpoint kind of thing on these craft. So he gets these videos declassified. The Pentagon comes out and acknowledges this is real. We don't know what these were. We still don't know what these were. And these videos are 100% real, taken by the pilots. And you can find video. There's 3 videos. There's the Go Fast and then there's another one I can't remember the name of, but the most prominent of the three is the Tic Tac UFO, because that is the one backed by Commander David Fravor, and his witness account, as well as the witness accounts of his crew, are incredibly compelling when you watch this video. Have you seen the TikTok UFO?
Yep.
TikTok.
Those damn TikTokers. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely makes you kind of take a step back and go, what maneuvers like that?
Yeah. And it backs up a lot of I think the whole point I wanted to raise with that, not only to segue into talking about the declassification and stuff, but just the point of it backs up what Bob was saying in 91. This craft, it backs up Lonnie Zamora from 1964. Yeah, Lonnie Zamora described a Tic Tac.
Yeah, like this, like how this thing and how it utilizes this interesting way of jet propulsion and how it maneuvers and moves. And also one of the, I think, kind of main things that gets put out there about UFOs is how silent it is, how quiet, how you don't hear a big booming.
Yeah, there's no sonic booms.
It's just maybe a light hum.
Yeah.
In some instances. So you again, having that shit declassified and put out into the public echelon, and you just kind of have to go, that's weird.
I don't think it's something worth panicking over, and I think this is what the U.S. is starting to realize. I believe that they're starting to kind of understand that they don't, like, ultimately the space is no longer going to be the romanticized future frontier. It is very quickly becoming the frontier, and the sci-fi, fiction things that we grew up on are very becoming a reality every day. I mean, Elon Musk is actively talking about, we're going to put a man on Mars, we're going to colonize Mars, we're going to have bases in the galaxy. This is the
chips in your brain. It'll make you live forever.
Here, man, we're gonna put the Neuralink in your brain, and it's gonna fix. If you're paraplegic and you have a problem with your limb, we're gonna put a Neuralink in your brain that makes it so you can use your limb again. Miraculous advances in technology, and this frontier that was once the fringe, just like you said, like your dad was always trying to find that gauge, but it was once the fringe. It was viewed as kind of like the outsides of reality and what we know and what we can prove, and now it's no longer the fringe.
Yeah, now it's just the morning cup of coffee.
Now it's just the morning cup of coffee. Now it's, the walk down to the street to go to the park. It's just like anything else. And it deserves as much scientific approach and attention. It deserves as much funding, and it deserves transparency, which is something we've never had up until this point. We need to know what they know.
I mean, look at the past. I would garner to say the past 8 years. The things that have happened in the past 8 years. Again, I made this comment earlier. You can't write this shit. You can't. And where we are at, in 2021, we had the guy from The Apprentice was our fucking president.
Don't remind me.
We survived a weird, and we're still in the midst of a global pandemic. Aliens being declassified, that's normal now.
That's exactly.
When I was a kid, like literally, shit, I think I put this shit on the floor. Okay, so in one of my dad's folders, there's a picture I drew because I saw what I thought was a UFO when I was 8 years old. He asked me to draw it,
and that's the craft you saw.
And that I just saw this little black kind of like almost like a Tic Tac shape, but it had like
claws,
almost like it looked like little crab claws under it.
Yeah, and that's your description of it is backed by Lonnie Zamora, who claimed it had those claws at the bottom.
But this is me as a kid, terrified. Like, what in the world? I can't even fathom. When you're a kid of the 80s and 90s, this shit is like what the fuck? But now, like we just said, this is the norm now. Like,
Yeah.
I'm gonna go to work tomorrow and like I'm gonna talk shop about the fucking Mothman with one of my coworkers. Like, the weird and esoteric is becoming the norm now. And I low-key think my dad's kind of rolling over in his grave.
He was a pioneer of sorts.
He's like, he goes, this shit wasn't supposed to be cool. Fuck y'all. You shouldn't be getting laid for this shit.
After all the suffering that us nerds had to go through for y'all to get here.
The non-pussy that we didn't get. All the weed that we smoked and the beers that we drank late at night listening to Dead Kennedys in our fucking engineering office.
Coast to coast, till 4 in the morning.
None of you kids understand. And so now we're doing like hip TikTok dances to like Tom DeLonge declassifying
alien UFO. Yes. What a timeline. What a weird.
And it happened so soon. If you think in the entire span of human history, the time from even like 1991 with Bob Lazar to 2021, 30 years. In the span of human history, that's a grain of sand on a fucking beach.
It's nothing.
And so to jump from that point of like to he's on fucking Netflix. Oh, this is weird. I'm gonna go watch it while I eat fucking popcorn.
Yeah. Maybe I'll beat off and go, smoke a joint before I go to bed.
Yeah, after watching the Bob Lazar documentary, I gotta give myself a fucking tug after that one. Woo.
Just to decompress after that one, dude.
But that is like we've said, it's the norm now, but that also gives a little sort of light that if this is the norm now, we're just scratching the surface on the most insane shit that we can't even fathom. What we thought was unfathomable is now norm.
So what's Ian's take on it? What's Ian's take on it? I know earlier you talked about extra dimensional beings. We've covered a lot in this. It really hasn't felt like an hour, because when you get talking with one of your good buddies about something that you like to talk about, it doesn't feel like a lot of time's passed. It's already been an hour and we've covered a lot. What is it? I mean, what is it, Ian, that you think? I mean, give me your breakdown of what life according to Ian, the universe according to Ian Reiter.
This channel, Carl Sagan, the universe
is
so
very vast. There's a lot of it, and
we're all made of star stuff. No, okay, so there's always this talk of amongst the youth these days of like, the simulation is glitching, especially since the Matrix came out when we were like teenagers, and you're like, are we all just having a fucking thing in our brain stems and this is all simulation? And the fact that blue pill or red pilling somebody on something is like a thing now. I know that's a popular thing. I don't think we're in that world, but I definitely want to always take a step back and just kind of go, there is so much unknown, and let that excite you. Don't be afraid of the unknown. Let it excite you and burn you. You and I are musicians. You have a new EP coming out. I believe it's in the end of May.
Yep, May 28th.
May 28th. I gave you that plug. What's up, guy? And then my band is doing some things currently that are as top secret as Area 51 at the moment.
Okay.
Which isn't even really top secret anymore, I guess. But the fact of the matter is, even as us creative types, what well do we pull from? Where do we draw our inspiration? There's this belief in the world that all things, like in all energies, are connected. And my belief system whether it's spiritual, scientific, whatever fucking level of existence that we have on this current plane, everything is interconnected. And what makes life worth living is the continual discovery and the continual search of a new song, a new fucking alien aircraft. The fact that I don't fucking know jack shit about the ocean. I thought I did. I fucking thought sharks were cool as fuck. I want to look at weird jellyfish in the fucking ocean. I don't know even a fucking cent's worth of what's even in our own fucking backyards. And some people, the normies, tend to get intimidated by that because people want to live in their own aisle. They want to kind of like, I just want to do my thing. I want to eat, I want to fuck, I want to go to sleep, I want to go to work and pay my bills, which great. But take a second in your day to stop, especially if you're on a night drive. Take a second and just look the fuck up and just go, I am nothing. I am so insignificant in the big scheme of everything. And don't let that be a depressing thing. Let that be a fucking inspiring thing, that I am a part of this in some tiny microcosm capacity. This is insanity. I guess I'm riding this son of a bitch out, guns blazing. I don't know.
What else are you gonna do? No.
Right. I'm gonna ride this neutron bomb all the way down.
Well, Ian, I appreciate you joining us tonight for the PIDCAST. I got a lot to think about after this conversation. I feel like probably a lot of people who saw it probably got a lot to think about tonight as well. Yeah, and I really like how you wrapped it up, because it is in pursuit of the unknown that drives us forward. At least it should be. And for me, it is the pursuit of that unknown. And maybe one day we'll get to a point where we know everything that there is to know. I can't imagine that. I imagine it's got to be such a tremendously boring life.
Well, I mean, what's funny is, as you shared what I posted earlier of, I was trying to dust off as many cobwebs as I could, because I'm gonna be honest with the viewers out there. I haven't talked about this shit in so long. Like, I am so rusty. There's a lot of names and shit. I'm like, because this shit was not things that I, dove into, just by book. These are things that I was just raised around. And so I've literally had to go back through my dad's old archives. I've had to kind of just look at old manila envelopes or folders of just like old articles and journal entries and case studies, and
maybe
through
we'll have
that.
to do a follow-up episode, where maybe you can actually like bring some of that stuff to the forefront and the table and be like, hey, well, this is what I got. This is the archive, man.
Oh, well, I would have to also shout out to my brother Trevor, who I picked his brain a lot too, because there were just some things I'm like, did Dad ever say this? Did he ever? And he's like, yeah. And then he would elaborate on it. So he definitely he really cleared up a lot for me.
He's kind of the archivist of sorts.
Right. Well, because him and my dad, Trevor's my oldest brother, and him and my dad, he had a lot more exposure because he was older while these things were happening. So he had a lot more cognizant presence. But long story short, I posted one of my dad's sort of journal entries earlier, and essentially talking about how never stop moving. Like, existence needs to be kinetic. We need to constantly be feeling. We need to constantly be in motion, because the second that we have come to a complete being content and stop, life as we know it actually will cease to exist, because it's, what's the fucking point? And so that's why he's is this what the Krishna was talking about? Is this the reason for human suffering? Is this the reason why we feel sorrow? Is this the reason why? The whole point of it is saying that, what is the point of our existence on this weird dirt ball in this fucking weird pool of non-air antimatter, which is like, what the there is no point, but then that's the point. Keep going, keep finding inspiration.
There's
And
something.
there's always something, even when there's nothing. And if that's anything to kind of like, be the summation of my dad's life, but then also the life I'm wanting to lead, I'm wanting to give to my daughter and to share with my friends and family and loved ones, is this idea of just don't stop moving. Keep it weird. Shit's fucking weird right now. I'm on a podcast. I got to be up in fucking 4 hours. We're figuring it out. And which, by the way, thank you for having me on here. I
But
fucking love doing this shit. I just all fucking love talking to you. But like, fucking, we're all in it together. Let's figure this shit out. Let's keep it weird.
yeah.
Bigfoot is an alien. 2021. Guns blazing, bitches.
And that is, I think that's gonna have to be like the ultimate conclusion that this podcast. Yeah, we talked for over an hour, and what we figured out was basically that Bigfoot was an alien. So
Yeah.
If nothing else, I'd say that that's a pretty damn compelling conclusion.
Hell yeah.
Before we peace out here, I know that you've got to get up early in the morning, and I've got to open up my job tomorrow as well. So get wrapped up before too long. But let's go through some of the comments, if there are any more comments, and just see what people.
I take a gander here. We kind of quieted down. I think we actually do have quite a bit. Okay. All right. So I'll start from the last where we stepped off.
Okay.
Aliens are just checking in to see if we blew ourselves up with nukes yet, which would be
Maybe sure.
would be actually kind of hilarious if aliens visiting Earth are just kind of like, y'all dead yet?
They blow themselves up yet?
Not yet.
Okay.
Fuck. All right.
They got the weapons to destroy other things outside of the Earth yet? No. Okay.
All right. We good. Can we pick up this real estate yet, or no? Not yet. They're still fucking there. All right. And just like me in this podcast, love what you guys. Have a great night. When this posted, I'll catch up. And then he corrected himself. Dylan Bauer saying PIDCAST. And then Eli, in all caps, goes, okay, Bigfoot being an alien and stealing semen to male hybrid offspring is the type of shit that I am here for.
That is the kind of energy we were looking to bring to you.
Yes.
With the PIDCAST tonight.
And then Caleb Reiser's like 100% on board with the extraterrestrial Bigfoot theory. Eli is also diving in going, I've always really liked the interdimensional Bigfoot theory. And then Caleb added, 1 second. I theorize that Squatch are interdimensional ecologists. Definitely need to come on and discuss some of this weirdness. And then he followed that up with the Native American belief can also be tied with the interdimensional theory as well.
Dude, maybe we at some point do a three-way podcast where we get Caleb on, and and maybe you can bring some of your dad's case files and some of that stuff to the table, and we can actually like look at it and be like, okay, this is what the fuck is going on. This is what I know.
This is what I know about Bigfoot.
He's an alien. He's a gay space alien who likes NASCAR.
Well, I will say this to maybe make it a sort of like teaser for maybe a potential future episode is sure the idea of Bigfoot being an interdimensional and or interterrestrial being, great. Not my personal favorite. I really, really, really want Bigfoot to just be this rare, big fucking ape. That's just what I want. Because okay, I have a pretty short bucket list, and one of the items on the bucket list is I want to go squatch hunting. I want to go into some fucking woods in the Pacific Northwest. I want to poke some weird shit on the ground. I want to punch some trees. I want to yell like a fucking, I want to do that shit. Come on.
Yeah.
So what we need to do is Paco is desperate, and this next chapter of what was formerly Grubby Paws. Oops, teaser.
Oh.
We need to go on a fucking tour to the West Coast strictly,
just so we can go squatch hunting.
just so we can go Bigfoot hunting, dude.
Yeah.
It's what I fucking want.
Dude, we could have a show in the woods. Like we could just, outdoor shows are gonna be kind of the thing for a while anyway. That's what everyone's gonna want to do. We can do like a big outdoor fucking Bigfoot fest, dude.
They have Squatch
Tacoma,
Festival.
Washington, in the woods of Tacoma, Washington. We just fucking all go with our flashlights and our cameras, and we start fucking squatch hunting.
Not only that, record a live PIDCAST.
Sweet. See,
from the woods.
The current plan for the PIDCAST is we've got it booked out and ready to go up until the EP comes out, and we're probably going to end up making this a seasonal affair. So as much as I would love to sit here and say that I'm going to interview a guest every single Wednesday and do all the prep work that goes into a podcast, the truth of the matter is that I work full-time at a professional job, and then I also do Paco's Desperate and all my stuff creatively as basically a second full-time job. And so this will be a very seasonal thing, but I think it would be fair to say that this probably won't be the last time we'll talk about this or have our friend Ian here talking about it with us either. This topic of extraterrestrials, Bigfoot, the paranormal, the things that we don't know, the captivating things, the things that make life worth living, as Nick Reiter said, and as I think Ian so eloquently touched up on earlier. The things that make life interesting, make life worth living, are the unknowns, and these are the things that we're here to talk about. This isn't a UFO podcast. This is a podcast by a musician who just happens to be interested in UFOs.
Right. Just getting weird on a fucking Wednesday night. Fuck it.
All it is.
Why not?
Ian, thank you so much for joining me and being my guest tonight. I'll let you go. I know that you've got work in the morning and stuff. Everybody who tuned in, everybody who's in the comments and stuff, thank you guys so much for tuning in. Next week on this very show, tune in at 10 p.m. I will have Brandon Rupska from the band All American Chess Club to talk about All American Chess Club's new single and everything that they've got going on coming up. So tune in next week. I've got another really special guest. And with that being said, Ian, is there anything else you'd like to add before we hop off here?
One, my camera just went out. Because that means the feds are on to me. And two, wear your fucking mask, get vaccinated, touch some butts.
Vaccine is available to everyone 16 or older in Ohio. No excuse for you guys not to go out and get vaccinated, so that way we can get back to playing live music. See you nerds next week. It's been a great time. Ian, I'll let you do the outro for us.
I'm currently being taken by the van right now. I'm getting pulled away by the feds. Okay. It's been good. It's been fun. See you guys on the other side. Have a good night.
I will post the link to his bail fund later for everybody. All right. Take care. Ian, have a great rest of your night. Thank you so much for your time, buddy.
Bye, y'all.